Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, can men ever really understand the daily fears and sexism experienced by women? We go to an all-male panel to find out. Well, viewers and community, you have got this conversation well and truly started. Malika Bilal, our digital producer, is trying to catch up with you. What's going on online?
There are lots of people with lots of things to say, and a lot of them are asking questions, and this is going to be a candid conversation, so we want to hear all of those questions. Now, you talked about having women share their experiences and have men understand what those are like. Right. Online, we're seeing tweets like this. This is from a woman named Tara, and she says, "My husband didn't get it," meaning those experiences, "until he spent half an hour on a Twitter feed. Then he looked ashen. I had no idea." And the Twitter feed she's talking about is Yes, All Women. We'll talk about that during today's show. We can't do it without you, so tweet us with hashtag AJStream.
And right here in the studio, we have EDUARDO Garcia. EDUARDO is a writer and he's a regular contributor to the Good Men Project. That's an online magazine focused on, I'm going to quote the magazine here, what enlightened masculinity might look like in the 21st century, end of quote. EDUARDO, we will find that out in just a moment. Welcome. Now remember, this is your conversation, and to take part in it really easy. You can go to our Facebook page. So go to facebook.com/AJStream. You can join the 200,000 something people who've already liked us. Scroll down here and let us know what stories and what hashtags you are following.
Hi, my name is Carl. I'm an online satirist and I'm in the stream.
Angry at women over romantic rejection, 22-year-old Elliot Roger went on a shooting rampage in California last week that left 6 dead. In a very lengthy digital footprint, he voiced his disdain for females. Here's a clip from his final YouTube entry.
"And I will slaughter every single spoiled, stuck-up, blonde slut I see inside there. All those girls that I've desired so much. They would have all rejected me and looked down upon me as an inferior man if I ever made a sexual advance towards them." So, in response to the killings that Elliot actually went on, hashtag Yes All Women emerged as ladies began airing everyday anecdotes of mistreatment, violence and harassment. Now online, some men seemed shocked by the revelations while others responded defensively. So is there a disconnect between the two sexes, and can men ever really understand the daily fears and the sexism experienced by women? Today we speak with an all-male panel to find out. Joining us to talk about this via Skype, anti-sexism activist Jackson Katz. Ravi Chandra is a psychiatrist and blogger with Psychology Today, and James DESBOROUGH is a writer and game designer. So gentlemen, welcome to the stream. I'm calling this a male clinic because there are going to be questions that you're going to unload amongst yourself. People are going to ask you questions as well. Let's start off with that hashtag Yes All Women. EDUARDO, when you started reading through it, what was your first reaction?
That they finally had an opportunity to say what they've been dealing with. And usually men will listen to women's issues and automatically they'll fall into this defensive mentality. But this forced it in a way that it's right there. You can't avoid it. And it ended up calling out the men who wanted to dismiss it and expose them for the fact that they were simply dismissing it. It's not about simply viewing women's issues, but about viewing society and everything that both women and men had to deal with, and maybe that disconnect that we still view as women's issues and men's issues, and each try to ignore the other because they try to feel that their point is more important.
What do you mean by defensive, men being defensive?
Try telling something bad about someone.
Right.
Their automatic reaction is, no, that's not me.
Ah.
Instead of seeing, okay, you're complaining about something. What is it?
Yeah.
Their immediate reaction is a dismissal, and unfortunately, the way the media works sometimes is you have a short amount of time to expose a problem, and that time is being eaten up by just simply dismissing it as, I'm not part of the problem, so I don't mind.
Well, Well, Jackson, it's interesting that Eduardo said that, of course, because Sam tweeted us. He says the first thing that most men say when they're exposed to violence against women is, but not all men are like that. So, Jackson, I mean, this is an understandable reply when you want to disassociate yourself from violence, is it not? Can you explain some of this reaction?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Malika. It's very similar to white people who don't want to take responsibility for whatever participation we might play in racism. It's like not all white people are racist. Just because some white people are acting out in racist ways, not all of us are guilty. It's a fairly predictable first-line defensive reaction, and I see it and hear it all the time, as if that's the complaint, as if that's what women have been saying. They haven't ever been saying that all men are such and such. They're saying that we have a system of sexism. We have enormously deep misogyny throughout the world. Women have to live with it on a daily basis. Men, in their own ways, have to live with it. And we have to be honest and have an honest conversation. And the first step in having an honest conversation is having people who are willing to listen to each other. And I don't think men have been listening too much to women in a general sense for a long time, because these are not new issues. And I've been in this work for 30 years. I mean, women have been talking about this in small groups and in feminist literature and on women's studies programs on college campuses and universities all over the world, have been talking about this stuff for decades. Now, because of social media, because of this heinous act in Santa Barbara, California, now we're having this conversation, like Eduardo said, in a bigger way, and men are hearing things that they should have been hearing all along, but it's a positive step forward.
I think it's a legitimate reaction. I think you're dismissing it far too easily. I mean, any group that gets broad brushed, a movement to liberate that group or to argue with the point is to start by saying, not all men, not all white people, not all black people, not all Islamists. That's where it starts, and there's a double standard here in that men are being broad brushed. So I think men are reacting to that double standard and coming forward and saying, look, you're saying all men do this, and I know people deny that, but that's how it's communicated, how it comes across. And so I think not all men is legitimate. You start there. Not all men. More men need to not be like that. But you're going to lose people if you put them all, if you talk about like male violence rather than particular acts of violence.
James, can I share
men as a whole?
James, can I share a couple of these Yes All Women tweets for you and just see what your reaction is? So hashtag Yes All Women, because apparently the clothes I wear is a more valid form of consent than the words I say. Not all men harass women, but all women have at some point been harassed by men. Food for thought. And one more, because men don't text each other that they got home safe. So James, how do you react to that kind of dialogue that really came from nowhere and suddenly it's like unloaded on Facebook and on Twitter, and it's talking about your gender?
Well, I don't know that it's from nowhere. There's been other hashtags like this before in the past with the same kind of outpouring, and it hurts. It does hurt. I think it hurts a lot of men to think that they're feared. And that there's not necessarily a good reason for people to be afraid of them. I mean, just you stand behind someone while they're getting money out of the ATM, and you're a guy and they're a woman, and you can see this kind of tension and fear come over them, and your stomach just sinks because you're not like that. You're not going to attack someone. That's one of the least likely things that's going to happen, and they're terrified of you, and it's. Yeah, from the male side, that's an awful thing to experience every day, to have people afraid of you.
Jackson.
Right, but I appreciate that, but the people that I'm upset with are men who assault women, so that therefore women don't trust me and other men who are not violent because they can't know the difference. So instead of, I don't get frustrated with women for being afraid of men or for being suspicious or cautious around men. My challenge to men is we as men need to start challenging each other and holding each other accountable. And
I don't want to. I don't want to dismiss it. I want to know that the fear is at an appropriate level. I mean, there's a problem with the 24-hour news cycle and tabloid newspapers making old people afraid to go out of their homes, as by way of analogy, because they think the world is a much more dangerous, crime-riddled place than it was, when in fact the world has become a much safer place since the mid-1990s.
Yeah,
so they're afraid, over-afraid, if you like.
But at what point does it become that it's not dangerous? When you think about the statistics, it's literally everybody knows a woman that's been sexually assaulted. I ask all my female friends since I've been a teen, when I would take them home, I would walk them to the door just out of habit to make sure that they got home safe. Whenever they would leave where we got together, as soon as they got to their houses, I'd ask them to call me so that I knew they got home safe, because that's a reality. Maybe now it's more evident. Now it's literally in your face.
That's right. Well, I think this is all right, and you have to have pretty big blinders on to say that there's not a problem with violence and misogyny and mistreatment of women the world over, because historically women have been viewed as objects and commodities by men for all of human history. But I think that deeper, the defensive reaction is there, and we have to get beyond that. Maybe some of these men who are saying not all men, I think they're aware that there are a lot of men who are, and men have problems with other men who are violent, aggressive, and narcissistic. Yes. And so we have a problem within our own gender of how to deal with such situations. But I think, so the women are raising a very important point, and the men are saying, I think if we get beyond the defensive reaction, it's wait a minute, don't hate me. I still need to be in relationship with women and with men as well. How do we do that? So that's the question. How do we be in relationship? Absolutely. I think we all have to have our responsibility towards being in good relationship with each other.
Right, gentlemen, take a pause for a moment so we can go to the community, then we'll come right back to you. Malika.
Well, there's an interesting thread here, and we've seen a couple of tweets like this. James, and I'll direct this to you. This person on Twitter says, he's talking about the role of men in feminism. He says, the man's role in feminism is to agree with everything the feminist says or be branded a misogynist. Another person writes in, this is Colby, he says, men's role, 1, shut up, nod your head, only ask women approved questions, and resist the urge to mansplain. James, do you ever get that feeling? And I see Eduardo is shaking his head next to me, but James, what's your thought on that?
Don't mansplain. It's ironic that someone would use a sexist term like that. It's very matronizing to use the term mansplain.
Do you want to mansplain what mansplain means, James?
To mansplain is to be in possession of the facts while also possessing a penis.
Oh, okay. That's your reading of it. I could tell you what I think it means, but it's the man show, so I can do that tomorrow.
We have a great word for that already. We have a great word for this phenomenon, and it's called being patronising.
Right,
and
okay.
Does it.
But James, your thoughts on men's roles in feminism, and because people online are saying when we try to speak up, we're batted down.
I think it needs to become a conversation because, well, many a true word is spoken in jest, and while those couple of tweets you said, you know, they used a bit of hyperbole for effect, I think it does need to become a conversation. On your page, one of the first comments we had was, oh, why on earth are you talking to men? This shouldn't be happening. And, you know, that's often the reaction. But then, you know, I've spent the last few years trying to get a handle on what feminism's saying, but there's this meme of it's not my job to explain this to you, which is really counterproductive. You know, I've been actively trying to learn, and people just keep pushing you away. And any disagreement.
Can you give us an example of a push away? So you're trying to join in the conversation, and what's a push look like, or what does it feel like?
So say I don't understand what you mean by patriarchy because, you know, I've studied politics, I have a particular understanding of what that word means, and it doesn't seem to apply to how it's being described to me. So I have a problem with that, and I go to ask, oh, it's not my job to teach you, go and read this, go and read, you know, Google it. Which isn't very helpful because you just end up with a massive contradictory explanations and no real idea any clearer what it means in this feminist context and whether it should be that.
Jackson?
There's something. I mean, these are such important issues. I think there's lots of I don't mean by James, but I think in the last week and a half, I've read so much online. There's so many, I have to say it, ignorant comments about what feminism is, and people make, including, you know, a lot of men who have individual experiences with one feminist, or they read one blog somewhere and they make some general statement about feminism. Feminism is, to me, one of the most basic philosophical and political and social movements in the history of the human species. It's a gigantic worldwide transformation that we're all part of, women and men. It happens at different paces in different societies. And so the idea that, you know, there's such a thing as a feminist, one way of thinking about feminism is itself problematic. As a man, I have never really felt that I've been attacked by feminism. I think I've been challenged by it to think critically about how gender and how gender affects everybody, women and men, on the level of social structure, on the interpersonal level, and relationships and sex and everything. I mean, some of the things that people take for granted.
Step in for a minute there?
You just did, James. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. My primary experience with feminism hasn't been with academic feminism. It's been with what we might call NGO feminism and Tumblr. The very, very harsh, very, very nasty, you know, pseudo-troll online feminist activists. And the NGO feminism on the other side, people like anti-pornography campaigners, censorship campaigners, people who are behind trying to bring in the internet filter in the UK, people who want to ban extreme pornography, people like that. They're really driving their way into the culture, and it almost feels like they're using feminism to forward this. And it seems a really kind of unholy alliance in the UK between feminism on one hand and traditional conservatism on the other, in trying to control media, really.
So
that's
Mr.
where
James,
I get lost.
Take a breath, because I know Jackson just wants to come back to you. I know Eduardo and Ravi wants to jump in, and we've got the community going, hello, what about us? So Jackson, make your point briefly, and then we'll do a round robin very quickly. Go ahead.
Oh my goodness.
You were mid-flow about feminism.
Feminism has enormous implications for both women and men. It's a belief in the social, political, and economic equality between the sexes,
right.
And that has enormous implications not just for women but for men. And my work, I've been working with men for 30 years in the sports culture, in the military, in the schools, and engaging with young men and older men in racially diverse environments. And I think when men can get past the defensiveness and the defensive hostility that they have to the idea that they're being attacked, or somehow feminists are somehow anti-male, they can have a thoughtful, honest conversation about how we contribute or don't contribute to advancing equality and justice, or how we might contribute to participating in systems of inequality and injustice. And that's going to make people uncomfortable, just like white people are going to be challenged if they think honestly and critically about racism in all its dimensions. A lot of white people are going to be challenged about that, just like heterosexual people are going to be challenged if they believe in justice and equality about how they might participate in heterosexism. At all levels, I think we have to have the honesty and the strength to look inwardly as individuals and collectively as men. And sometimes we are going to be feeling defensive, and I appreciate that. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
All right, community, Malika.
Well, Ravi, we got this video comment who's from someone who's actually taking this back to what started this all, and that, of course, is the killings. I'd like you to have a listen to this.
Hi, my name is Aaron Morse, and in regards to the Yes All Women hashtag, I agree with the message. Yes, all women face sexism every day, and it's a big problem in society. Where I have a problem with the hashtag is its origins from a mass murder. I don't know if that guy is a product of a sexist society or something else. I don't think we'll ever know. Yes, he obviously hated women, but I didn't like going from mass murder to everyday sexism. It seemed like an inappropriate transition.
Ravi, I'm wondering what you think about that. Of course, he talks about the social media angle and how a conversation gets started, but I'd like your thoughts on whether or not equating this with those killings was an incorrect thing to do.
Well, you know, I think the digital footprint and the videos lay out that a lot of what played into this young man's psychology was a sense of exclusion, and he was directing his anger against women. So I think it's very appropriate that women and men were particularly concerned by his racism and sexism, and this naturally led to the hashtag, and I'm so glad that it happened. But I think that we cannot solve problems of relationship through social media, unfortunately. We have to relate to each other in yes.
You just said that on a social media show. Get off.
I know.
All right, you're done. Moving on. I tease.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to be played out in relationships in real time with our friends, with our families, with our communities. And this is actually one of the great benefits of feminism, one of the great advances of feminism, is talking about the relationships between the genders. And relational cultural theory shows us that most of human suffering, in the American context in particular, is about a disconnection between people, a disconnection in communities, and a disconnection with the planet Earth. So I think this is there's a lot of contributions from feminism, and sure, social media can definitely be a prod and a goad, but we have to solve these in our own communities.
Now, gentlemen, I promised I wouldn't talk too much, but there's something I do want to share with you just before we wrap up this first part of our program, before we go into the post show. And this is my vision of what a male feminist looks like, is Louis C.K. I think he's funny, he seems to get women, he's funny. So this is a little bit of his stand-up act where he's actually talking about something that we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes or so. Have a listen to Louis C.K.
Still go out with guys when you consider the fact that there is no greater threat to women than men. We're the #1 threat to women. Globally and historically, we're the #1 cause of injury and mayhem to women. We're the worst thing that ever happens to them. That's true. You know what our #1 threat is? Heart disease. That's the whole thing.
So he's a comedian, but that to me is like the perfect male feminist. Eduardo, if we had to say what a male feminist was, would it be Louis C.K.? What is it?
That's a perfect example. A lot of times we try to sometimes maybe be too politically correct and not stand up against certain situations because we don't want to seem maybe part of the problem, part of the patriarchy. Maybe we don't want to look bad in front of other men.
Right.
The reality is, first of all, feminism is just simply equality. It's equality amongst all of us. But to get to that feminism, we need to challenge a system that's, in the case of Elliot, was telling him that he needed to prove his masculinity. And whatever therapy he went to, it was being counterproductive by all the blogs and the social media telling him from pickup artist forums and from different groups.
All right, take a breath for a moment. I hear what you're saying, and then James is disagreeing. James, you've got a minute to make this point because we're wrapping up this part of the program.
I think it's really, really dangerous to pick something and blame it. We've seen it happen before with video games, with backmasking on Judas Priest albums, with Dungeons and Dragons. It's very easy to just pick one thing and blame it when there's a whole complicated situation involved, and I do not approve of that at all.
No, but what I mean in that sense is that you get cheerleading. Literally, I'm not talking about individual websites, I'm talking about from one point we're telling men that we need equality, and from the other side we're having men telling each other this is how you get women. It becomes a cheerleading on both ends, and what it ends up is giving a completely confusing message. And someone
I agree
who's
with you
not
about internet echo chambers. I'm just really
I understand.
So many bad experiences. I'm really, really worried about people picking one single thing and saying that's the cause.
Okay, so that's James DeSborough. He's a writer and he's a games designer. You also were here listening to Eduardo Garcia. He's a contributor to the Good Men Project. We have Jackson Katz. He's an anti-sexism activist. We have Ravi Chandra, who is a psychiatrist and he blogs for Psychology Today. These men are good. I don't often say that. There's more of them in the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. On our next program, we look at this issue but from a slightly different angle. Maybe James can actually tweet in. We're talking about sexual harassment and misogyny in video games. Is it time to break up the boys' games club? Until then, we'll see you online. Thanks for watching. Hello, this is the Stream's online post show. We're carrying on our conversation with our all-male panel who are giving us a lot of insight into the way men think about women's issues. So we have Eduardo Garcia, we also have Jackson Katz, Ravi Chandra, and also James DESBOROUGH. We're going to start though with Malika Bilal. What do you have?
Well, I want to pick up on something that Eduardo said right before we entered into the post show, and you were talking about challenging the system. So we got this tweet from Manasi. She says, some male friends have told me that group dynamics among men pressures them to tease women in India, for example. So Jackson, this is a tweet from India, but this of course is a worldwide phenomenon. It doesn't just happen in India. So practically for our audience that's watching all around the world, what do you tell a young man who is surrounded by his friends and his friends are telling him, yes, go do this, yes, taunt this woman? What do you say?
Well, that it takes courage and strength and self-confidence on the part of a man to challenge his friends and to not be part of the group when the group is doing something that's harmful, and that's not you're not going soft. It's not because you're weak. It's not because you're less than a man. It's because you're actually a strong man who cares about justice and fairness and nonviolence. And it takes a lot of strength in men and young men to not participate in some of those group activities. And by the way, just one point, this might or might not be new to people, but there's some really interesting theory about gang rape that suggests that what's really happening is the dynamic is what's happening between the men. The woman or the man, or if the man is a victim, it's usually a woman. The woman is just a completely dehumanized, depersonalized object. What's really going on is a sexual and a homoerotic and a homosocial dynamic between the men. So the dynamic that really has to be looked at is what's men's relationship to each other, and how do you break that conformity to these sometimes toxic group norms in male culture. And one of the ways to do that is to, like I said, to define strength as the strength to resist being participating in abusive activity.
So this sounds like you're workshopping us. This sounds like something that you would talk to in a group of people, and I know you do this. I'm being a little cheeky here. But if James is sitting there, so James, you work from home, you look after your family from home, so we've got a little bit of gender roles difference going on here. Practically, what Jackson just said, does that resonate with you practically? Like if you and your mates are down the pub and somebody says something, do you feel like, oh, Jackson told me that, this is how I'm going to deal with that kind of misogyny?
I've never really been that kind of guy to join in with that anyway. But I took a straw poll of my friends, which is completely unscientific, to try and understand catcalling and why there was this huge differential between what women were telling me and what men were telling me. And those ones who admitted to catcalling and harassment, it was all about showing up to the other guys. Just kind of proving their heterosexuality and strutting their stuff, kind of, really. It was more about the other guys.
I want to show you something. This is a little disturbing, and this is totally Ravi's territory here. So the response to the massacres the other week was a hashtag yes all women. Okay, overwhelmingly quite positive in a way of actually saying this is not a good thing. And then there was another strand online, this one from Cornelius Washington. Elliot Rodger is a hero, God rest his soul. A picture of him underneath the word hope. And there's something else that we dug up, which is kind of intriguing. This is Elliot Rodger Retribution, the video game. This game was published on May the 28th. The massacres happened on May the 23rd. Eduardo is already covering his face. He's like, he can barely watch this, which is good because I have to tell you, I'm going to warn you, it's not a good thing to see. But Ravi, have a look at this.
Elliot Rodger when you're playing Elliot Rodger Retribution.
I desire girls. I'm sexually attracted to girls.
They never understood you and they never will. So it's time to inflict your wrath and take no prisoners. It's time for Elliot Rodger Retribution. Get it now, free on lollicast.com.
So 3 days after this mass murder, we have a video game. We have people tweeting out, Elliot Rodger has a fan club. Ravi, how is this possible?
Well, It's obviously it's disgusting, and there's a lot of shock value in a culture that is basically largely built on domination and control. You're going to have these people who want to be victimizers, and they feel their power in making someone their victim, whether it's online in a video game or in real life. I think we have to break out of that culture of domination and turn to a culture of collaboration and cooperation and working together, because this obviously is pathological.
So I'm thinking, how? If I was watching this and I was a guy, and actually I'm watching this and I'm a woman, I was like, how do you do that? That sounds fantastic, Ravi. I love how you said that on TV. How do you make that work off TV?
Well, I think you begin by having real communications with the people in your life, and not treating people as your tools. I mean, not to use people, but to be with people, and that's important for all levels. And I mean, the person who first heard about women's harassment through a hashtag, well, I mean, you know, it's why not listen to the people in your life? You would have probably heard a lot of these stories in a very meaningful way, by listening to your mothers, sisters, daughters, friends, and that's how you begin to change this this culture.
Right, Malika.
Can I hop in about the
go ahead.
The trolling and the game there? People like that will latch on to anything. I mean, anyone who's had any strong opinion online about anything will get trolled. Whenever anything bad happens, trolls are going to turn up like, you know, like crows to a feast, really. And you shouldn't show it. You're giving them what they want. You shouldn't have that even on this program. You're just giving them the attention that they want. The only solution I've ever seen that works for trolls is to deny them attention, not give them any. They shouldn't be taken seriously. They're just doing it for a reaction. Let them and ignore them.
And another thing that you have to create is a society of empathy. It's the idea that you have to see something like that, and if it offends you for whatever reason, express it and have the other person try to understand it. Not talk down to anyone, but actually talk with the person. A lot of the times, most of these conversations die down because it's me voicing out my issues, my problems, and I want you to listen to them, and not, let me tell you what I'm feeling, what problems I'm suffering, and you can tell me yours, and maybe we can come to a certain understanding of what makes people better and how we can help each other.
Well, Eduardo, talking about empathy, I'd like you to have a listen to this video comment. It's from Jacob. Have a listen to what he has to say.
I think most men are not aware of these circumstances surrounding violence against women and the societal structures that we participate, whether consciously or unconsciously, that lead to them. I think it's very important to educate men at a very young age on the dangers of objectifying women and feeling entitled to the female body.
So he says most men aren't even aware. After this hashtag broke out, personally, I'd like to know your own personal story on this. Did you get more in tune with the women in your life and their own personal experiences, or was this something that you were already tuned into?
I was tuned in to a certain degree, but this opened up the reality. At one point, most of the people that read my articles and visit my blog tend to be men around 35 up to 50. It's that more mature generation that has already lived the problems and has had those issues confronted to them. I was asked to start considering doing chats and workshops for high school and maybe middle school, and I thought it was an interesting idea, but deep down I thought, no, my target is usually older gentlemen. Till I saw this situation and I realized we're trying to fix broken people. Why not just go after helping them when they're young, telling them, listen, don't go down that path. Explain to them why, not just simply telling them, don't do this, this is bad, because you're gonna end up with games like those.
Right.
Just telling them, listen, this is what happens when you do. These are the people you might hurt, including yourself, including men. It's not just we're hurting women so you don't have to mind. It's you're hurting yourself, you're hurting the people around you, and create that mentality since they're young and try to instill it while they're young.
All right. So this is the best kind of mansplaining. This is the kind of mansplaining that I'd love to spend all day listening to. So gentlemen, we are out of time, but I want to give you, apart from Eduardo, because I really hear very clear where Eduardo is coming from, I want to give you all a sentence to give us a takeaway from this conversation. What is it that you think is important from the hashtag Yes All Women that you want to share? Just a sentence, if I may. Jackson.
I think adult men need to be, especially those of us who are fathers and who are community leaders and who have influence in the educational system and the sports culture, need to provide opportunities for young men to talk about some of these issues, learn from each other, learn from women, and have dialogues with women and girls. There's an awful lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings and lack of insight and empathy on the part of men for women's experience, and sometimes the other way around. Right. And those of us who are influential need to make that possible. We can't expect young people to be the ones taking the initiative. We that have some social, political, and cultural power need to be the ones who take the step forward.
Ravi, what's your one sentence takeaway from this conversation?
I would say that our masculinity, our masculinity has to include being a compassionate listener and being a creative person in creating a culture of compassion and standing up against sexism and all forms of hatred, standing up against violence, and standing for values of the heart and of community.
Beautiful. James?
I think you summed it up pretty well. Actually, it needs to become a conversation. It needs to be two-way between men and women. At the moment, things like Yes All Women feel more like you're being lectured and there's not much listening going on the other direction. So yeah, a conversation.
Wow. Eduardo, Jackson, James and Ravi, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being part of our AJ Stream conversation. It will continue online. Hashtag AJ Stream, hashtag Yes All Women. Now, our next program, we look at this issue but from a different angle. Online video games are not just fun and games. Sexual harassment and misogyny run rampant in the virtual world and they have real world consequences. So should the Gamers Boys Club be broken up? Is that even possible? Two questions for tomorrow. See you there.